Hello, everyone. Welcome to the Civic Forum on Whispers 87.7 FM. My name is Uche Nogo. Pleasure to have you join us this lovely Monday morning. So, as Nigeria prepares for the 2027 general elections, political contests are increasingly shifting from campaign rallies to courtrooms across several opposition parties. Dispute over leadership, party structures, the primary elections have resulted in growing number of lawsuits, rising cases about party unity, internal democracy, and electoral readiness. The African Democratic Congress is currently facing legal challenges over its leadership, while the National Democratic Congress is also dealing with litigation arising from its primary elections. These cases have sparked widespread debate about whether opposition parties are being weakened by internal divisions or whether the judicial process is simply ensuring compliance with the law. These are the conversations we're having this morning on the Civic Forum. To help us unpack these issues, I have joining me Dr. Oluwatoyin Aladegbami, LL.M, Ph.D, Principal Legal Resources Law Office. Welcome and thank you for joining us on the Civic Forum.
Thank you so much for having me here.
Thank you so much. So, there have been a noticeable increase in litigation involving opposition parties from a legal and political standpoint. How significant is this trend as Nigeria, approaches the 2027 elections?
Well, as we can see from the feedback we get both from the court and from the media, we see that yes, the trend has been quite significant, though not unexpected, because we all have our rights to protect in one way or the other. It is significant because pre-election litigation would often determine those that will appear on the ballot paper, and each party needs that to be protected by time, so it does not seem like one has slept on one's rights. And legally speaking, we know that, well, everyone just needs to go back to court to be the arbiter in a situation where we have such concerns and such disputes. So parties definitely would go to court, which is what we are seeing now. So it's not an anomaly, it is the right thing to do. And when such comes before the court, it is for the court to determine applying the electoral act that we have. Politically, however, persistent litigation projects instability in the party structure, party collaboration and all that. Why do I say so? Because if parties are able to manage their disputes effectively, we'll have less of such come to fore. And you forgot to mention, I'm a mediator as well. We've been to INEC, and INEC now has the mediation center as well to help political parties settle such pre-election disputes so that we can forge ahead smoothly without too much problems. But more importantly, it's worthy of note to let everyone know that persistent litigation projects instability and it weakens party cohesion. And that is why we have split of parties these days. You see people moving from one party to the other, which should not be. So I think we should begin to look inward and see how we can manage the disputes effectively as against going to court per time. Because while judicial intervention is very important and essential, preserving and protecting our democracy is more important. And in doing so, I think we should begin to look inward. Intra-party mediation centers can be made compulsory so that once the disputes arise, within few minutes, few hours, they are settled. Thank you.
So, opposition figures have alleged that state institutions are being used to frustrate political opponents. Legally speaking, what threshold of evidence will be required to substantiate such a claim?
Well, in law, we say the burden of proof lies on the party making the allegation. When such allegations, well, they are serious. it just depends on the magnitude of the allegation. Like I said, some can be settled in-house through mediation spontaneously without wasting time. But evidence may also include official documents, communications in which certain aspects of the dispute may have to be settled in the court of law. We can't take that away. But we must also know that Nigerian courts determine cases based on admissibility of the evidence brought before it. So when such allegations come to fore, it's better for us to go to court to determine the way forward in such a situation. Mere suspicion of speculation is not admissible in law. So it is important that we have our evidences properly put together, and then we go to court if we are not able to mediate in-house. Thank you.
So at what point do internal party conflicts begin to threaten a party's electoral prospects?
Well, when we talk about internal party conflict, it could come at any stage. You know, we are all wired differently, and the way we respond to issues are different. Now, internal conflicts become electorally damaging when they affect the leadership and the legitimacy of those in the hierarchy of the party structure. And again, when such, especially when it comes to selecting candidates, you see that when there are no elections, we don't really have much to litigate about. We don't really have much to go out to the media to complain about. But when we talk about choosing of candidates, raising funds, management of funds, and gaining public confidence when it comes to the process of of a candidate it becomes an issue. So once disputes persist close to those time of election, the statutory electoral timelines or results, we see that parties begin to complain and all that. So what do? We look back at the way things were done before, and then we begin to do it in a better way to avoid such. That is what my own opinion about it, really, because I know that there's a way we can reinvent the wheel to make it work for us better than it used to. However, we all know that yes, some may be adamant because of their own personal maybe aggrandizement, gain, or whatever you call it, but they can still be managed. It's all about people management, really.
So can prolonged litigation affect INEC's recognition of a party's leadership or candidates, particularly when election timelines become really tight?
The Electoral Act we use right now is the 2022 Electoral Act. And there it prescribes the procedure and the timelines that parties must comply with. In saying that Nigerian courts have consistently held that although political parties generally enjoy autonomy in managing their internal affairs, the courts will intervene where mandatory statutory provisions or constitutional requirements have been violated. So once it is violated and it is brought before the court has to intervene in one way or the other. And don't forget, in our court of law also, we could also apply that the issues or the matters be heard timeously. That is when you see parties come before the court and they receive judgment almost suo motu. Yes, we have to comply with the law, but the court also helps the parties when they come before it to ensure that the timelines are followed and the law is complied with. So because the timeline is critical. Yes.
So what reforms should political parties adopt to minimize pre-election litigation and strengthen internal democracy ahead of 2027?
For me, I would always talk about mediation. Political parties should strengthen their internal dispute resolution mechanism. The conduct of transparent and credible primaries is very, very important. That is the major challenge that most political parties have. Transparent and credible conduct of the primaries is very, very important. However, we should also know that it is important to strictly comply with the provisions of the Constitution, the 1999 Constitution as amended, and the Electoral Act. And parties are also advised to maintain accurate membership registration. because we see that, thank God, INEC has done a lot to help the citizens of Nigeria now to ensure that everyone has every eligible citizen has a voter's card. It's by choice, however, but a lot has been done to enlighten and sensitize people on the need for voter's card. So once all those are put in place, we'll encourage mediation, internal mediation, and INEC too has as in place now, though it's still being reorganized and refined, mediation center in which such disputes can quickly be resolved to ensure that we have smooth election and electoral process. Also, leadership should prioritize consensus building without compromising democratic principle. When we talk about consensus building now, for example, in a family, how do they choose the head of the family? It could be by voting, and it could be by any other means that they feel will be suitable. That is why, for me, I still feel delegates, the use of delegates would always work and make things easier. That's my own suggestion on that.
What message do these legal battles send to Nigerian voters about the readiness of opposition parties to govern?
You mean generally the issues
Yes.
in court, like
Yes,
the ADC issue,
exactly.
the NDC issue? Well, human beings as we are.
We'll be human beings.
We are all human beings, and dispute is a part of us. There's a saying in my place, they say the teeth and the tongue, they fight. So even we as human beings, we fight ourselves. In making choices, we think forth and back, and then there's confusion, and then we end up making a choice, and sometimes we regret the choices. So when we talk about dispute, it is a part of our life. It is not, I don't see it as a problem, but our ability to identify the issues, the root of the problem, nip it in the bud, or manage it effectively is very, very important. So the message that I would think is that frequent legal battles may create the perception of disunity and disorganization. It could also create the perception of weakness in some parties. However, where parties demonstrate respect for the rule of law, there will be less dispute. Where parties comply with judicial decisions, there will be less dispute. Where parties choose, dispute resolution is about personal choice. When we talk about mediation, parties must show interest. You can't force anyone into mediation. So where parties choose to mediate to settle the dispute, it helps a lot. And the message that will be sent is that, okay, we are managing the disputes effectively, and everybody sees that it is being managed. However, when we see all these disputes going on, quarrel, it is not a sign of problem at all, as far as I'm concerned.
Is it because you're a lawyer, so you don't see it as a sign of a problem? For the ordinary Nigerian, might just look and like there's so much wrangling going, and it worries, it throws people off.
It is not because I'm a lawyer. I just told you that we human beings, we cannot do without disputes. Even when we're alone, we have disputes, and we manage our disputes. So I want every Nigerian to see it from that perspective, that if you can manage your own dispute, sometimes you're in the house, you break a plate. You'll be angry with yourself, but will you kill yourself? No. But if a third party were there, or a second party were there to break the plate, would you be angry? Would you be the person of the answer is probably yes. I say so because we also need to understand, empathize with people, ensure that even where disputes arise, we manage them effectively. And I also like to encourage Nigerian voters that the political system, when we look at it and compare with other countries, it is not as if ours is so bad. No. Other countries are managing theirs well. So when we see the dispute, it's not a time for us to complain. It's a time for us to see how we can, contribute our own little quota to ensure that the disputes are resolved. How do I mean? From the comments of some social media people, from influencers and all that, they escalate certain disputes. So if we can all begin to live in that consciousness, to be intentional about ensuring that disputes are quickly and easily resolved, it will be better.
Nigerian voters are likely to judge political parties not merely by the existence of dispute, but by their capacity to manage the conflict. So regardless of the disputes that we see, the ability of each political party to be intentional to ensure that the disputes are not escalated is very, very important, because it shows that they are responsible and the internal democracy is working in such parties. So when there are disputes, fine, there is, but the joy is ability to manage the disputes effectively, uphold the internal democracy, and present a candidate that is more acceptable, not just forcing a candidate on the party, but a candidate that is more acceptable. It would gain the trust of voters. We are very easy and happy people in Nigeria, and it's also important that policy alternatives too. Our ability to disseminate information timeously is important. Once parties are able to do that, I'm sure that the voters generally would definitely want to work for a party that is able to do all that I've mentioned.
I have been speaking with Dr. Oluwatoyin Aladegbami, LL.M, Ph.D, Principal, Legal Resources Law Office. She is also a corporate governance expert, accredited mediator, public policy consultant, and executive trainer with over 20 years of experience in legal practice, governance, and dispute resolution. Thank you so much for your insight on this important issue.
You're welcome. Thank you so much.
And to you, thank you for joining us on the Civic Forum. Tomorrow we'll be back with another topical conversation. My name is Uche Nogo. Have a great day.
Thank you. Is that all?